Equity is deadly, but let's just blame it on climate change. In this week's episode, we will be taking a closer look at the fires spreading from Maui to the mainland, those that are going missing without a trace, and where this is all leading. So let's start looking. Welcome to the second episode of the Magnifying Glass Podcast. I'm your host, Elena Moore, and with me today is my co-host, Liam Ford. Let's go ahead and get into it. So, Liam, can you lay out a little bit of groundwork of what you're seeing right now in your research that's going on in Maui?
Right. Well, part of the problem is that everything is so isolated, it seems impossible to find any reliable source of information that's willing to, kind of piece together what we actually know. So the onus is on the readers with a story like this, which is really sad because there's so much that happened in Maui that we don't know about. There's so much sadness that the families feel about the government response to it, and so a few of the things that we know that have come out in the last week or so are definitely starting to give cause for concern. They're definitely starting to raise some eyebrows. One of them being the Hawaii Deputy Director on the Hawaiian Commission on Water Resource Management withheld water because of equity for hours. And again, we don't know what impact this had, but obviously whenever you're fighting a wildfire, and especially on an island with limited resources, the ability to get water to the source quickly saves lives. And this guy goes back for months, and even last year I know there's videos of him bragging about his mission to support equity in his business and how he is conducting affairs for the Commission on Water Resource Management, which is just not something that should be done. Because at the end of the day, whenever you're talking about equity, you're basically saying we don't want to favor one group over another. We don't want to come across as racist. We don't, all of the different tropes that you hear in modern media has no business whenever it comes to dealing with a wildfire crisis and a fire moving across an island at 50 miles an hour. It absolutely should not be in any purview of the guy responsible for water. But that's not the only official that has some problematic statements on the record about what they're doing and what's happened since in Maui. One of the Democratic senators from Maui said that the fires like the one that just happened are the new normal.
Well, I think we all have to understand that severe weather events are going to get more frequent and more severe. Hawaii is a place that has experienced volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and hurricanes and tropical storms. And we've had a few wildfires, but nothing that threatened a whole city, nothing that flattened a whole city. And I just think this is the new normal for not just the state of Hawaii, but for the whole planet, for the whole country. So, as we contend with increasing severe weather all the time, we're not only going to need to take action on climate, we actually need to be prepared in terms of our emergency response at the state, local, and federal level for the kind of disaster that maybe you hadn't contemplated before.
Senator Brian Schatz from Hawaii, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this morning. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
And this comes as we still have up to maybe 1,000 or more people that are still missing, and they're already trying to turn this into a political pawn to push forward their climate agenda. And that's a real weird disconnect when you have officials who are responsible for coordinating the search effort, who are responsible for making sure that the firefighters had the resources they needed and failed to do that. But at the same time, while there's still thousands of people missing and they have not done their job adequately for the last 2 weeks, they're still going to grandstand on the crisis and then use that for political purposes. I mean, that is not the way that you should be governing, and that's completely inappropriate behavior from the officials out in Hawaii.
And you're not supposed to be politically correct when things are when you're dealing with people's lives.
No. It was always a joke that, whenever a crisis hit, nobody would care about political correctness. Evidently, that was wrong. It shouldn't be wrong, but turns out it was wrong because this guy was literally staring at an inferno that was burning people alive. and was more concerned about how equitable his water distribution would be perceived in the press than actually putting out the fire and saving lives. That's an incredible thing to have happen.
Yeah, so don't worry if you're dying. There will always be a political correct answer to follow up with your death.
Yeah, exactly. It's more important that you died politically correct than if you lived and there was maybe a hint of some not politically correct behavior on behalf of the officials responsible for coordinating the effort to save your life. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're being told.
Gotta watch who you elect.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's dozens of statements now that are coming out. One of the most infamous now has been the governor of Hawaii is saying that the state is going to try and acquire the land that was burned. I mean, this is a land that is worth a lot of money, a lot more than people who live on it now paid for it to begin with. But it's also something that, I mean, we've known and we talked about in our last episode, where there are really big names that have been trying to get more and more land in Hawaii, which is interesting, right? Because if the sea levels are rising, and you know that, why would you be buying land on an island that would be the first one to be overrun by these rising sea levels that you talk about all the time? But well, that's another conversation for another day. So what does that look like? And again, why is the governor, when he still has thousands potentially of people missing, a lot of them children, why is he worried about or coordinating or even thinking about how he can acquire land that, for all he knows, has the remains of burned children on? Like, what is the thought process there? It doesn't make sense.
Well, you know, and I think it's interesting because the Post-Millennial reported that Governor Green, the governor of Hawaii, stated that I'm already thinking of ways for the state to acquire that land so we can put it into workforce housing, to put it back into families, or make it open spaces as a memorial to the people who were lost.
About preserving Lahaina moving forward.
I'm already thinking about ways for the state to acquire that land so that we can put it into workforce housing, to put it back into families, or to make it open spaces in perpetuity as a memorial to people who were lost. We want this to be something that we remember after the pain passes.
That's insulting. I mean, that seems like a bunch of empty promises to me. I mean, what does he mean by workforce housing? What does he mean by putting back families, the families that died, that are there on the land?
Yeah, it's super open-ended. And again, you know, why is that the focus of his administration at this point in time? That's private land.
It's messed up. It shouldn't be. Yeah, it's private land. It's not his for the taking. So, we're just going to sit here and benefit off of all of these people that just died, all these people that lost everything that they own, and probably a lot of people close to them. Oh, but we'll take your land, don't worry. I've heard that a lot of times in the past history, just reading history when it comes to acquiring land. Oh, we'll be friends with you, and we'll move in and take everything you have and all of your land.
Yeah, I mean, Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago and mentor to Obama, has a famous quote saying, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And from everything that I've seen, they're definitely not going to let this one go to waste, because they are moving in like vultures really, really quickly to try and scoop up the valuable land, to try and score political points for their climate agenda, and anything else that they can do. It just seems like a one-stop shop for them to push their political agendas.
Yeah, and I saw that the Hawaii governor, his full name, Josh Green, recently I saw a video where he is saying that, oh, don't worry, with Maui, we will build back better. And we're going to play that clip real quick.
This is going to be a multi-year recovery. It's going to take essentially years to rebuild Lahaina, which was destroyed. But we will build it back better, and we'll build it back proudly.
Build back better.
Building back better.
To build back better.
We're going to build it back better.
And build it back better.
My plan to build back better.
In that video, he says, build back better. Oh, I've heard that a lot of times. Have you, Liam?
You know, with COVID coming back all of a sudden and Build Back Better, I mean, I'm just getting a replay of 2020. I have to say, there's a lot of deja vu happening right now, and I don't like it.
It is not good deja vu. And just to give a little context on where this Build Back Better slogan came from, it was a slogan promoted by the World Economic Forum's globalist anti-American Great Reset agenda. It was a slogan that's been used by Joe Biden's plan to rebuild the American economy. Oh, that's going great. The House of Representatives in 2021 voted to pass almost $2 trillion Build Back Better Act for Biden's social spending. And we've seen it multiple times come up in talks at the World Economic Forum about the Great Reset. Even the former Secretary of State, John Kerry, who's Biden's special presidential envoy for climate, because, you know, we need one of those so badly, declared that the Biden administration in 2020, this was in November of 2020, will support the Great Reset, and that the Great Reset will happen with greater speed and a greater intensity than a lot of people might imagine, and that it will happen. The Great Reset will happen. So it seems to be happening. It happened in COVID. It happened with the vaccine. Seems to kind of almost be happening here, because after we see a lot of these disasters, I've been noticing a lot of elected officials stand up and they say, oh, well, don't worry about the disaster. We will build back better. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the Build Back Better slogan just seems to, problems seem to follow wherever that ends up. Obviously, Joe Biden used it for his campaign in 2020, but there's also pictures of a bunch of other world leaders in front of Build Back Better slogans, and I believe Justin Trudeau himself even used the slogan as well. And a little bit of foreshadowing, things aren't going so well in Canada right now, either with connection to wildfires. So yeah, it's definitely one of those very concerning slogans that seems to allude to problems coming your way in the future.
And one thing I also saw was that 4 weeks ago, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, I'm probably butchering that, said that climate change is speeding up, and you can see that in this video.
And for scientists, it is unequivocal. Humans are to blame. All this is entirely consistent with predictions and repeated warnings. The only surprise is the speed of the change. Climate change is here. It is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable, and the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable. Leaders must lead.
You heard that, what he said at the very end, leaders must lead. Well, they are leading us straight to the Great Reset, and I am not a fan of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's either prophetic or, well, he's at least very good at predicting the future. Let me just leave it at that. I won't make any accusations, won't say anything else. I'll just say that, it's pretty convenient that 2 weeks after you make these statements, there's now huge wildfires breaking out all across the world. Not just in Maui, which is concerning. Just to get into that a little bit, there's one in the Canary Islands. Residents of Tenerife are just now, today, finally beginning to come back as fire crews continue to work to contain the large wildfire there. 37,000 acres across the largest of Spain's Canary Islands off the west coast of Africa. Over 13,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. In Washington State, the governor, again, just like in Hawaii, immediately took the opportunity that wildfires and the platform that they were providing him to say that they need to decarbonize the economy so fires don't ravage us. You can see that clip here.
Because the fact of the matter is there's a beast at our door, and that's the beast of climate change. It seems like the whole world is on fire. We need to defend ourselves from climate change. We need to decarbonize our economy so these fires don't ravage us. There's not enough fire trucks in the world to protect us if we don't stop climate change.
And even further north of that, in Canada, there's dozens of wildfires now raging across Canada, including one of particular interest in Kelowna, which a couple of years ago it came out that it was supposed to be the first 5G town. Kelowna project will serve as a blueprint for the development of made-in-Canada 5G smart city technology.
You know, there's something really weird with the whole smart thing and disasters. I've been seeing an evident pattern recently where cities that are targeted as smart agenda, it seems to always be a disaster, and then government officials emerge and say, oh, we need to build back better. And I've been watching very closely to Myrtle Beach the past year since it was dubbed smart. There's already been fires close to the area over the past several months that have been coming to fringes, and I just wonder when it's going to be hit with a hurricane or massive fires, which the world looks on fire if you look at the current map. If you just go on and see the current active fires, I mean, it has popped up everywhere.
Yeah, I know there's another big one, or a big few actually, in Texas. Over the weekend, I know that Texas A&M Forest Service stated that resources responded to 21 new fires, and then on Sunday, they responded to an additional 16 wildfires that were burning. So they're just popping up right, left, and center right now. Part of that is, it's going to happen, dry, arid climate. But again, it's not so much that they're happening, it's the response that they're garnering. It's how people are trying to parlay these wildfires into immediate political points. And it's how these wildfires are exacerbated because the officials in charge of containing them are more concerned with equity than actually doing their job. So, again, not everything here has to be faked. Now, I'm not saying that every wildfire was started deliberately or anything like that, but they're definitely not doing their best to put them out, and they're definitely way more concerned about how they can use some natural disaster to push their reset, their great reset, score political points, and really just find a way to take more of your freedoms than they are actually doing their jobs and protecting their constituents.
Yeah, I'm not one that believes in coincidences, but you can make the decision for yourself of where you think these things are originating from and why, if there's a why.
Yeah, I know there's one, there's a famous video out of Italy where the Italian police actually captured an arsonist going around on a Vespa with I think it was a gallon of gas or something like that, and using that to start fires. Which, again, if you think about that, if you think about the wilderness that is along the west coast of the United States, in Oregon, in Washington, in Canada, where these fires are cropping up, it'd be super easy to do that, and it would be super easy to get away with it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's getting a little too easy, especially when you have no one doing anything about it. And the citizens that live in these areas are there to fend for themselves. I believe it was a couple of months ago when there was a wildfire happening somewhere in the U.S. where the farmers were going around plowing their fields, trying to create a barrier between their fields that had been burned and the fields that have left to be burned. And they were struggling. They had put that thing into high gear, just trying to plow as big of a line on their property to try and somewhat stop it from spreading the rest of the way. Was there anybody there to help? It didn't really look like it. It kind of looks like everybody's just there to fend for themselves, which, I mean, I'm sorry, with how much money that they receive through taxpayer dollars and aid and for emergencies such as this, it seems like all the money just ends up going to political correctness, DEI, a bunch of things that don't really impact you directly. But when it comes to your life,
I would say that, if you're pushing equity in the face of a wildfire, I'd say it actually does impact you directly, not in a good way, in a good way, obviously. Thank you, because of your DEI and everything else. My house and my family are now burned, but at least we have filled our slots with diverse individuals, and we have pursued equity right up until the day we died.
Hey, as long as it's not the same race dying all at one time, I guess, unless they're Hawaiians.
Evidently, that's where their priorities lie.
Yee, that's scary. Well, let's take a turn and see what's happening in California. It's not looking good. It's not really looking good at all. The Petaluma, I believe that's how you say it. It was reported, I believe this was by CBS, that Petaluma Fire Department said this past Monday, which was August 21st, that 9 of its firefighters have been deployed to assist in ongoing wildfire and storm-related responses in California and recovery efforts following a deadly wildfire in Lahaina, Maui. It also it reported out of Northern California that there was 1 dead. There was some old growth, could be threatened. A firefighter was injured. Let me see exactly where that was.
Yeah, I know the state also deployed, I think it was 7,500 in Southern California, including 3,900 highway patrol officers and 2,000 Caltrans workers to aid local communities. Again, this is all happening as a hurricane makes landfall. Well, I think it's a tropical storm technically, that brought a lot of flooding. I know there was a 5.1 magnitude earthquake that happened right basically when the hurricane was making landfall. And then further north in California, you have more wildfires, believe it or not. So yeah, California is definitely bearing the brunt of damage right now from at least 3 different angles.
Yeah, when that earthquake, that 5.1 magnitude earthquake that happened in the southern area at the same time that hurricane was hitting, everybody on the internet on Sunday, which was August 20th, started hashtagging it, hashtag hurricane, which was kind
definitely sounds like it sounds like that something that Hollywood would dream up. It's almost like the Sharknado type of energy.
Oh, just give them a couple of days. They'll have a book out by it, just like with the Maui wildfires. There was a book out 2 days or less than 2 days after the Maui wildfires, so I'm sure they'll have a book coming out any minute now.
I'm sure I'm going to find out in the coming days or weeks that there's actually a correlation between global warming and an increase in earthquakes as well. Because obviously, they've done and well established, in their minds at least, the correlation between global warming and increase in hurricanes. So if we can tie the earthquake side of this whole situation in, then we've got a trifecta. The wildfires can be blamed on global warming, the hurricane can be blamed on global warming, and the earthquake can be blamed on global warming. What more could you want? I mean,
triple
that's
threat.
A Green New Deal coming up.
Oh, I can't wait to see that one. I am so excited. Just another a way to, hike up your tax dollars because you don't pay enough for your slavery.
No, you definitely don't. And you definitely have no idea how much more you could be paying.
Yeah. And one thing that just really gets under my skin and gets my goat is just the amount of people that have gone missing in Maui. And that video of the mayor of Maui, I mean, I don't even have any words for it.
Well, again, it's just another layer of what is actually happening. For those wondering, the mayor of Maui was questioned by at least one honest journalist on how many kids were missing. He said he didn't know, immediately got very, very defensive, started threatening to cancel the press conference. You can watch that clip here.
I don't know.
Yes, you do. How many children are missing? You know.
I knew the answer to that. I would be happy to answer that.
You have no estimate as to how many children are missing?
I guess
Nothing?
we can end this right now if you guys want. Sorry.
This is one of the biggest questions that the people of Lahaina have, but you don't want to answer.
It always takes one or two to ruin it for everybody.
Please, this is our first one. This is our only
Well, we could say that about you. You ruined it for everyone.
You're welcome to say it. You're the media. You can say whatever you want.
You're a disaster.
All right. Okay. Please.
You've been the worst mayor we could possibly imagine.
You won't even wait.
Respect what? This is the most dismal response we've ever had.
You won't wait for your turn. You want to shout over these guys that are legitimate.
Why don't you give them the real answers then? Give them the real answers.
That's not his question.
Let him.
Yeah. You can go. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
But how are you supposed to respond to that if you're a journalist? You're doing your job, and he's going to turn around and threaten to shut down the entire press event, and then not only that, but blame you for doing your job as the reason that he's going to walk away from the community, walk away from journalists trying to get questions for the community, for these parents. Again, the whole thing is disgusting, really, because he's sitting there, has no idea how many kids that were his responsibility to take care of are missing, probably dead at this point. I mean, it's been 2 weeks now, so if you've been missing for 2 weeks on this small island in Hawaii, after the horror of that wildfire, there's not a great chance that you're going to be found alive at this point. So you've potentially over 1,000 more fatalities than are being reported, and you don't have any interest in providing answers to your community, to your constituents, to the survivors of this that have lost children or parents or loved ones, family and friends. Really? It's despicable.
It's embarrassing. I mean, sex trafficking and human trafficking is already such a big issue in Hawaii. I mean, there was one local newspaper I saw that said that their article was entitled "Modern Hawaii was built on human trafficking," and a lot of disasters like this, and it has been shown multiple times, that disasters like this breed that sort of despicable behavior of just really horrible people latching onto it and benefiting off of it by human trafficking those that get displaced or that were involved in a tragedy like this. And we've already, it was reported back in 2022 by NBC that Native Hawaiian women and girls represent 67 to 77% of sex trafficking victims in the state. It's a huge problem, and it's something that a lot of the locals talk about a lot, but it gets no coverage, it seems, at this point, especially when you have a mayor that could not care less about the children that are going missing and what would be happening to those kids, dead or alive, at this point. I mean, you don't play around with lives, period, but you especially do not play around with little kids.
No, and I mean, not to be morbid here, but if this is the care that elected officials have for their people, then it's not surprising that so many Hawaiians are taken advantage of and get wrapped up in this despicable human trafficking trade, because clearly their people don't care about them.
It is so sad. I mean, and this is why it is so important that I stress all the time, you have to get involved, because everyone says, oh, politics is too far gone. It's too far gone when you let it go too far. You have to get involved. Otherwise, it just becomes a bunch of people who consider themselves elitists that hold political office or some sort of status in an agency that's given unlimited power by the state government, and it plays with your lives. We're seeing this right now. I mean, it's just literally playing with people's lives for the benefit of themselves, I guess, to make them look better politically.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing God is what they're doing.
And elected officials don't get to decide who lives and who dies, but that's what they're doing. Thank you so much for joining us on the Magnifying Glass Podcast. We delve deep, bringing the overlooked into focus and magnifying the stories that matter to you. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share. Help us shine a light on even more discoveries. I'm your host, Elena Moore, and remember, sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference. Until next time, keep looking closer.